Good day, everyone, and welcome to our webcast, Driving Safety Culture with Digital Technology. I'm your host, Daryl Proctor, Senior Associate Editor with Power Magazine. Today's speaker is Jimmy Miller, the Process Safety Business Leader for Yokogawa Corporation of America. Jimmy has more than 20 years of experience in the process industry and has spent the past 10 plus years specializing in process and functional safety and safety instrumented system applications. Today's webinar is scheduled for 1 hour, and that includes time for a question and answer session that will follow the presentation portion of today's program. Before we begin, I'll run through a few housekeeping items. In the webinar platform, you should see a chat area and a Q&A area. If you experience any technical difficulty, you can ask for help using the chat function, and our production staff will assist you. To submit questions for Jimmy today, please enter those in the Q&A section rather than in the chat area. You can enter questions at any time during the presentation. We'll answer as many as possible at the end of today's program. Any that we don't get to during the live session will be answered via email after the webinar. And don't forget to click on the Handouts tab to download more information related to today's program. This presentation will be archived on our server for up to 1 year, and future viewing will remain free of charge. You can use the same web address to reach the archived program as you did to reach the live program. Before we begin, Power would like to thank Yokogawa for sponsoring this safety webinar. Sponsorships make a significant impact in helping Power elevate thought leadership. Yokogawa provides advanced technologies and services in the areas of measurement, control, and information to customers working in energy, chemicals, life sciences, water, food, and other industries. To learn more about Yokogawa's WRAP program, providing a gateway to a safer workforce culture, go to yokogawa-wrap.com. In today's rapidly evolving industrial landscape, ensuring the safety of your workforce and operations is paramount. Now let's explore the transformative power of digital technology in advancing safety culture within process industries with today's speaker, Jimmy Miller. Take it away, Jimmy.
Hey, thank you very much, Daryl, and thank you all for joining today. Looking forward to a lively discussion. Today's topic is going to be driving safety culture with digital technologies. My name is Jimmy Miller. I work for Yokogawa. I'm the North American Process Safety Business Leader. I hold both a Certified Functional Safety Expert certification as well as the TUV Functional Safety Engineering certification. Been in the process safety and process automation industry for many years. I am a self-proclaimed safety nerd, so if I start talking, you'll say, wow, this guy really is a nerdy kind of fellow. Well, I'm a self-proclaimed safety nerd. This is what I do every day, and this is what I enjoy. And I think that my passion comes through in my content delivery for sure. I also like to think of myself as an optimistic noticer in the process and functional safety industry. So I am an optimist by nature, but I like to observe what goes on in our industry and identify market trends and identify things that I feel like are issues and challenges that customers have. So I can kind of think about ways to help solve those problems and some of those issues going forward. So diving right into our agenda today, we're going to cover 4 basic areas here. We're going to touch on regulatory compliance. And again, should we focus our energy here or maybe somewhere else? We'll look at updated standards and industry practices around process safety as well as just HS&E overall safety. As well as go into some industry trends and the leveraging of digital technologies. And then we'll wrap it up with just improving safety culture within your organization and in the market in general. To kind of set the stage a little bit, I will tell you that process safety people and safety people in general are pretty conservative folks when it comes to new technologies and trends. We're not the ones that go jump and go right to the shiny new object in the room. Most safety people I know, they're the ones that still drive cars without fuel injection, that still have carburetors. They're the ones that still have the flip phones, and they're the ones that still have home phones at their house. So, pretty conservative in nature, especially when it comes to technology. But I think that as an industry, we have to do a better job attracting some of the younger talent to the safety business because, it wasn't really a very attractive business for a long time. So you had a bunch of no hair, gray haired folks like me, but we really have to attract some younger talent. So I think one way to do that is to start thinking about trends in the market and embracing some of those, and looking how we can leverage some of those digital technologies, because that's where all these younger folks coming into the workforce are really focusing their energy and time. Reliability continues to be a challenge and a focus in our industry. And what I mean by that is reliability of field devices. So, pressure transmitters, valves, safety instrument systems. There's always issues around failures. And whenever we're doing risk assessments for a safety application, you look at the failure rates for devices and determine what's the likelihood of those devices doing what they're supposed to do when called upon to do so. The reliability of a device installed in the North Slope of Alaska is going to be way different than a device installed in the Gulf of Mexico. So customers have to be cognizant of that. And also there's an overabundance of data. In 2023, there's data everywhere. We hear it every day, especially in our business. If you think about IoT and then IIoT and edge computing, all these other things, there's an overabundance of data, and we have to somehow manage all that. COVID accelerated the desire for connectivity. On the safety side, if someone came to me 10 years ago and said, I want to connect to your safety system from outside the plant, I would say, no way, no how. Well, here we are in 2023, and everyone wants connectivity. So, funny story, probably 8 years ago, I was at a work event, and a colleague and I were enjoying a couple of adult beverages, and he looks at me and he goes, what do you think about AI, artificial intelligence? I went, well, that's kind of cool. It's kind of like Star Trek stuff. He goes, no. AI for safety. And I went, you know what? That's one of those things I will never, ever, 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 ever consider. Well, you know what? In 2023, here I am talking to an audience of folks on a webinar, never, ever, ever about AI. So, never be careful what you say you'll never do. And also, I'll say that buzzwords are a buzzkill. And what I mean by that is in the process safety market and industry, as well as other parts of our business, there's always the new word every year, the new word every quarter, the new word every couple of years. And once in a while, you kind of get tired of hearing it. I think that leading up to today, I think the hot topic in the market right now is AI, artificial intelligence. But I'm gonna read off a notebook here, because there's a bunch of them that I wrote down as a note. But early on, like in the 90s, it was all about regulatory compliance. You have to be compliant. You have to be compliant. If you're not compliant, you're not going to have a license to operate, and all these things. And that was a true thing, but that was kind of the buzzword early on in the safety business. And then we started talking about diagnostics for field devices, pressure transmitters, valves, everything from Ethernet switches, safety instrument systems. There was diagnostics out there, and that was the big buzz for a long time. And then we have smart devices. Then people started talking about risk assessments, because risk assessments is at the core of everything we do from a safety perspective. Everything is about managing risk, whether it's cybersecurity risk, financial risk, process risk. That's what we have to do. So, doing a dynamic risk assessment was a buzz probably 5 or 6 years ago, where people said, it would be great if I knew exactly how safe I am today versus the day I started my plan up. And then as things went along, we started talking about, again, IoT, the Internet of Things, or the IIoT, Industrial Internet of Things, Industry 4.0. And then here comes COVID. And then we talk about digitization and digitalization and digital transformation. And up until probably 12 months ago, that was the big industry buzz, was digital transformation. And I think that, as that progresses and as that matures, then we start talking about the things that we hear today, AI, machine learning, deep learning. Companies have people with teams of data scientists. No one really thought about having a data scientist in the industrial field years ago. Neural networks and industrial AI. So those are the buzzwords that we hear in 2023. And again, as much as a lot of folks want to dismiss those, you kind of need to embrace some of those technologies and think, how can I apply some of those to my business today? If you look at regulatory compliance, should we focus there? I think the answer is regulatory compliance should just happen. Because if you're going to operate a facility manufacturing a highly hazardous chemical, hydrocarbon that's toxic or flammable, then you have to have compliance. And I think that's part of the cost of doing business. So honestly, Sheryl Sandberg, who was the COO of Meta, came out in an interview last year, and she said the ability to learn is the most important quality a leader can have. And I think when it comes to regulatory compliance, that should just be something that's automatic, something that we have to do. and it should be built into all of our processes and all of our technologies. And at the end of the day, we need to learn from what we do every day so we can continue to improve on our culture and on our safety leadership within our organizations and in the market in general. Because if I'm safe and you're safe, our industry is going to be safer as a whole. So none of us in our industry want to see anyone else fail when it comes to safety, because it puts a black eye on our whole industry as a whole, and none of us want that. I'm a big start with why kind of guy. So if you look at the regulations and the standards, back in 1992, OSHA came out with the OSHA PSM, the Process Safety Management Regulation or Code, and that's called 29 CFR 1910.119. And before 92, there were lots of incidents around the world for process facilities, lots of loss containment incidents, lots of fatalities and injuries and environmental issues that had to be resolved. So even prior to 92, a group of very smart, like-minded individuals got together in 1984, and they were part of the ISA, which was at the time the Instrument Society of America. They were the ISA 84 working group, and they put together a team of people to come out and develop a standard to help customers comply with that OSHA PSM regulation. Even though OSHA came out and said, we're the government, we're here to help, we're going to come out with a law and a regulation, and if you don't follow the rules, we're going to fine you and shut you down. That doesn't solve problems. All it does is give an enforcement agency the power to go and audit and make sure things are done right. But customers were a little bit challenged because they didn't have the in-house expertise at the time. They didn't really have the in-house knowledge. And what OSHA said, as long as you followed a recommended and generally accepted good engineering practice, what they call a RAGA-GEP, as long as you follow the rules and guidelines around OSHA PSM and you have a RAGA-GEP in place, then you're in good shape. Well, lots of companies didn't have a RAGA-GEP, right? Because they had policies and procedures, but some of the smaller organizations didn't really have things that help them do all the compliance requirements of OSHA PSM. So ISA 84 was finally released in 1996. So how many years is that? 12 years later, after they started, they released the first standard. And they define what the process safety lifecycle looked like. They help customers everything from risk assessments down through implementing a project, operating and maintaining a system. They did all the things, at least create the framework to help customers along that journey. And a year later, the IEC 61508 standard came out. And what that was a standard for us manufacturers to manufacture safety devices, whether they're safety instrumented systems or pressure transmitters or valves or positioners or solenoids. 61508 is the umbrella standard that basically gives the rule book on how thou shalt manufacture safety devices. And what happens is once you design and manufacture that device, you get a third-party certification body like TUV or Exida or some others to come in and verify that you did follow the rules of 61508. And as the years progressed, these standards got updated a little bit. The last major revision to the safety process industry standard, IEC 61511, happened in 2016. And now the ISA 84 standard and IEC 61511 have merged into one. And now it's called the ISA/IEC 61511. And that's the industry standard that all the end users use. And it handles the safety life cycle of their safety instrumented systems and everything that goes along with them. So, if you look here, all these red dots show the number of incidents. So back before 92, many incidents happened. And as the years progressed, those did get fewer and fewer. But of course, we're still going to have incidents for many reasons. Maya Angelou said, once you know better, you do better. Well, I think that as an industry, we are doing better, but we still have room for improvement. So if I look at the standards and just industry practices in general, this is kind of where I live. And for folks who don't really live and die by the safety life cycle like I do, this isn't that exciting for you. But to break down how the safety life cycle works, it's broken up into 3 phases. And that first phase is the analysis phase. And that's where someone goes through and determines how much risk is in a system design, how much risk is in your plant, how many hazards exist, and then you assign severity. So you're looking at frequency, consequence, and severity of a bad thing happening, of all the bad things that can happen. And once that's done, you identify those, you assign individual protection layers to help mitigate those risks. And then you come up with a specification on how you must design the system to keep that risk into an acceptable level. The realization phase here in the middle is when most of us manufacturers get excited, because that means that there's a project. And that means that we get to help design a system, engineer it, program it, write code, do all the installation, commissioning, validation, and startup. High five, because we did everything on time and under budget, of course. And then we hand the keys over to the customer to operate their facility. And then it falls into the operation and maintenance phase. And this goes on for many, many years. And that's the challenge. And I think that the manufacturing entity as a whole has done a disservice, I think, to the market for a lot of years, at least until the last 10 years, where we did a great job doing all the upfront design and installation, and didn't do a great job helping customers with the challenge of operating and maintaining their facilities. So I use the analogy as kind of like buying a car. In the realization phase, that's when you buy the vehicle, and then you bring it home and you operate and maintain that vehicle for years. Well, if you don't change the tires, and if you don't replace the windshield when it cracks, and if you don't replace the brakes once in a while, if you don't change the oil, all these things, the vehicle is going to fail. So just like a vehicle, if you install a safety instrument in the system, you have to do all the operation and maintenance requirements, or it's not as safe as it was the day you installed the system. And a lot of times, especially up until the last 10 years, that's been a manual process. And it's a very laborious process that most folks just don't have. They don't have the people in-house to do it, the time, or the budgetary resources to handle it. So I think that that's what we're talking about today, is different technologies, digital technologies to help maintain and operate those facilities going forward. So, there's three important numbers to me out there that I always talk about and always reference. And the first one is 644, the next one is 376, and the next one is 33. 644 is the number of times that document or documentation is referenced in IEC 61511. So what that means is if you're following OSHA PSM, if you have that requirement in your facility and you try to comply to IEC 61511, the process safety standard, there's 644 instances that says you must document, or you must have documentation for this. And what that is even though you're doing the right thing, you have to be able to prove that you did the right thing. And there's no other way to prove it unless you can record it, right? In addition to that, the standard mentions the word shall 376 times. Not should, not suggested, but you shall, or you must, 376 times. And then the last one is the number 33, and that's 33 times the word record is mentioned. So just these three items, just for the safety, process safety portion of the facility, is overwhelming. Just like this poor person over here in this photograph, it's very overwhelming. And I think that if you think about the fact that you have environmental regulations, you have financial regulations, you have all these other things that you're having to deal with for compliance purposes, just this little portion here can really become overwhelming. So leveraging some technologies and digital tools out there certainly will make this challenge a little easier to swallow for sure. So again, data is everywhere. Here in the process automation and process safety world, we have a thing called a historian. So all those little bits of data can be dumped into a historian, which is just like a really big file cabinet. So if you haven't organized that data and done anything with it, it's just collected and it's sitting in a file cabinet. There's value in that to some degree, but the real challenge is to take that data and turn it into information. Information is power. So once you can take that data and turn it into information, that's very valuable. And that's everything. If you have a piece of data and you digitize it, so it becomes a searchable PDF, you can actually go and search for things. That's great. It would be really great if you could take that information that you just searched and turn it into knowledge. At the end of the day, we always talk about one of the challenges in our industry being the aging workforce. And lots of there's way more folks retiring than there are coming into the industry. If there was a way to capture all the knowledge that exists in those facilities before those folks decide to retire and punch the clock and leave for the last day, there's power in that. And the fact that we can capture knowledge and build upon it and use it for actionable insights and create benefits, especially financial benefits, lots of power to that. So collecting data is one thing, turning that data into information is the next step, and turning that information to knowledge is where the real key is. And then it's a never-ending cycle, right? It's a continual learning process when it comes to data. A couple of definitions I think are important to look at, and I think that one of those is the definition of industrial artificial intelligence. Again, I'm not a safety guy who's going to say, go to the shiny thing, because that's not my nature, but I think it's important to understand the things that are out there that could be beneficial to our business, if not today, maybe next week, maybe next year, maybe 10 years in the future, but these things are they're coming to fruition for all of us, whether we like it or not. So it's good to wrap your hands around it and understand what exists out there. But AI, industrial AI in this context, refers to digital solutions that merge domain expertise and AI techniques to improve business outcomes across the industry and energy value chain to enable a journey towards autonomy. When I say the word autonomy, I don't want anyone on this call to think that, everyone's they're going to take our jobs away, get rid of people. No, that's never going to happen. I think at the end of the day, we need people always. And I think that that's the fear for a lot of folks who don't understand the technology is, AI is all about taking our jobs. Well, it's really not. But if you look at a lot of the safety issues and incidents around the world, a lot of them have to do with human factors. And if we can remove some of the human factors, not remove the humans, but move some of the human factors, then that's going to improve the overall safety of the whole entire world, not just our business. So if I look at what artificial intelligence is, the first word in 2023 for people who aren't really technology people, when you say AI, the first thing they think about is ChatGPT, right? ChatGPT is not necessarily an AI. It's more of a predictive text machine. So ChatGPT looks at all these bodies of textual works, and you can ask it a question, and it grabs all the information, and it returns something really, really amazing to you. But if you look back, you can reference where most of those devices, where most of those words come from, because it's just really a predictive text tool. But artificial intelligence is an umbrella term for computing techniques to allow machines to replicate the cognitive aspects of the human brain, becoming capable of perception, logic, and learning. We're really in trouble if they learn how to tell jokes, because I think that's where the power of AI would be. But AI, I think, is something we'll see from here going forward for sure. The next one is machine learning, and that's a subset of AI that leverages algorithms which learn from data without being explicitly programmed, unlike classic AI techniques. I think one example of machine learning is this guy right here. So if you have a smartphone, you have machine learning in your pocket. If you get in your car and you start to drive somewhere, your maps will pop up and say, hey, are you going to go to Starbucks because it's 8 o'clock in the morning? Yes, I am. That's really what machine learning is about, is looking at, without being told to, looking at your patterns, looking what you're searching for. So, we really hate going on Facebook or Instagram or whatever else, and you've been just talking about a new saw for a project you're working on at your house with your wife, and then all of a sudden you get an ad for that particular saw. Well, that's the way it works, right? There's algorithms built in, listens to what we say, watches what we type. If you check the box, say, I allow that, and it gives you that return. So I think it's pretty valuable to some degree. It's also kind of annoying and creepy at other times. So that's what machine learning is all about. And deep learning is a subset of machine learning, which goes into multi-layered neural networks. That's another one of those crazy buzzwords, right? Neural networks. Never would have thought about that 2 years ago in our business. But they're used to build algorithms that learn from vast sets of data. Now, the challenge with that is, where's that data come from? Is it all my data? Am I going to share data with my neighbor? Because my data and what my thoughts and what I do are so different than what my neighbor does and thinks. But that's how deep learning does. It grabs vast amounts of data and builds things and helps the system learn. So, it's just kind of good to get a baseline of where we're going and some of these words and what they are. So, not going very deep into this, but just to look at some of the evolving mega trends out there in the industrial and energy firms, we've identified some of those key priority areas where industrial AI can help navigate these challenges. And one of them is around design optimization. So if you build one plant and you want to optimize the design for the next one, you can look at some of the operating conditions going on in that facility and help improve that over time. It's just like we've been doing that for a long time around advanced process control. We can look at that and improve the process, but if you can improve the design, that's even better. Operation optimization, same thing, help reduce energy use and manufacturing costs by using AI to monitor and control and extract peak performance levels from your assets and your labor. Trouble loss minimization. We've talked about predictive maintenance in our business for probably the last 20 years or so. And that's really what this is all about is, finding a problem before the problem actually exists and getting it corrected so you don't actually lose any production. Supply chain efficiencies. Well, we know we've had challenges around supply chain for the last several years. Sure would be nice if there was something there that thought ahead for us and helped us solve some of those supply chain issues to help it become more efficient. Digital infrastructure upgrade. That's the big issue now, too. If you're talking about all these digital issues, then you introduce cybersecurity threats and cybersecurity problems. You have that big convergence of IT and OT. So, no more can you have an office IT person handling a process control system IT infrastructure or a process control guy handling IT. You have to have convergence of those two, and both have to understand what each do. And that's really what this is all about, is minimizing cybersecurity risk across the organization. Advanced operations, again, looking at your highest performing units or your highest performing plants across your whole entire fleet and replicating those efforts inside of your facility. And quality stabilization. Everybody wants the golden batch, right? Everybody wants the most high quality products they can come up with. If you can get to it one time and replicate it over and over and over, there's value. And people can do all these things today. It's just a manual process. And the idea is that you can use some of these new technologies to help automate some of these processes. There are potential areas that I feel that you can really, really leverage those digital technologies today without even doing a whole lot more work. Because like I said before, the data exists already. There's nothing new about having data. Everyone's always had it. It's just there in little islands and little pockets, and it's a manual process to grab it and do something with it. I think that the easiest way is to look at regulatory compliance documentation. Again, regulatory compliance should just happen when you wake up every day. Yes, I'm going to be compliant as an organization, but the documentation requirements are vast and they're great. Some of these tools are really good at going out and doing word maps. Word maps, look for particular words and go out there and build documentation based on that. And the great thing about these tools is once you build to leverage some of these technologies where it's not even invasive to your system, it's not really a risk to your process, is looking at just doing documentation. The other two, I'll kind of lump them in together, and that's e-logbook or electronic logbook and shift handovers. So all these facilities we deal with, the majority of them at least, are 24/7, 365 operations. So you have folks that work 12-hour or 8-hour shifts. At the end of the shift, the new shift comes in, they do a shift handover, and during their shift, they'll document and they'll put in a log things that might have happened, whether they're failures of devices, whether they're the process upset, a networking issue, whatever. Those are normally put in a log somewhere. And I tell you, over the years, this process has improved. So a majority of the people that I talk to now do have some type of electronic record keeping for their logbooks, and that's really great. But it still requires you to go and have to do a search for a particular word or something if you want to replicate or solve a problem today that maybe came up 6 months ago. But very few of them actually have intelligence built in where it identifies trends and tells you, hey, this happened today. It looks like something that happened 18 months ago, and this is what you did to fix it. My significant other is she's in the healthcare industry, and she's worked at a couple different places that use paper charts. Other places use electronic charting. But really, at the end of the day, in the healthcare industry, most of the time that's kept there to give information to the shift coming in, to see what medications we're taking, what treatments were done. But by and large, the biggest reason that that's done is for legal purposes. So in the event that the customer or a patient goes south, they can say, well, we did the right thing, and here is our documentation: what medications we gave, what amounts we gave, when did we do these therapies, and that's what it's for. And I think for us too, in the process industry, a lot of our documentation that we do is there to prove that we did the right thing. We have a design saying we're going to do this. This is my proof that I did that in the timely fashion that I said I would do it. And one more example, I was in the Air Force. I was a mobile missile warning system technician back in the early 90s. So we had these mobile missile warning systems built for for World War III that never happened, thankfully. And we watched for nukes that never came, thankfully. But we had issues with them. So we had basically mainframe computers and flat array antennas on 18-wheelers that we drove around the country and beat them up. So they failed a lot. So we kept a logbook for each one of these trucks or mission vehicles. And anytime we did any maintenance on them, anytime we had any problem, we always kept a log of it, and then we put it in a safe. So, a year later, if a truck had a particular problem, if you remembered that this other truck did, you could go and look in the logbook and figure it out. Well, if that was digitized, where it was actually searchable, then you could go and search what that issue was. And that is great. And it does save time, but it's still a laborious thing. But if you have some type of e-log book with some tools and intelligence on top that can watch for trends, and you can say, I had this problem today, and it says, oh, this happened 4 different times over a 12-month period in these other vehicles. That would be a nice thing to have. And that's how we need to look at our industry too, is we need some way to be able to intelligently step through that data. Another one here that I feel is really important is dynamic risk assessment. I think at the foundation and core of everything I do from a process safety perspective is a risk assessment. If you don't have a good risk assessment, then you're not going to have a good design. If you don't have a good design, you're not going to have a good system. So to do a dynamic risk assessment or a real-time risk assessment basically means, how sure am I that my plant is operating as efficiently and safely today as it was when I started up 2 years ago? Again, we know we designed it and installed it the right way, but there's an operation and maintenance phase. And if you don't do all the things required, then you're not going to be as safe as you were. If you don't hit your test frequencies that you're supposed to hit, if you don't maintain the system like you should, if you have items that are left in bypass for longer than are required, if you have to make assumptions when you do these designs. Maybe you assume that you would have a demand on one safety function once every 8 years, and it's happened 3 times in 12 months. So you need to revisit that and go back and maybe redesign that portion of your facility a little bit. And I think a really, really important one too is digital control of work. A lot of times people think about control of work, and the first thing they think about is work permitting. And you do need work permits, and digital control of work has to do with work permitting, but it's a lot more than just work permitting. Now, there's a solution out there that Yokogawa owns called RAP. RAP stands for the Risk Assessment Process. And again, everything at its core is about risk assessment. Whether you're doing control of work, whether you're doing process safety, whether you're doing cybersecurity, it's all about risk management and risk assessment. And what RAP is the fresh, intuitive gateway to a safer workforce culture. And it's funny, in 2022, 2023, everyone talks about safe work culture. It's a big buzzword in the industry too. And I think that that's more than just technology. It's about mindset and how you where your values are as a company and how those values are spread out across your organization down to your folks. So, the HSE in the UK and OSHA here in the USA identified 12 underlying causes of accidents, which they call the dirty dozen. And I'll dash through these pretty fast, but again, a bad hazard analysis, a risk assessment. If you don't have a good risk assessment, nothing else matters. Poor management practices or inadequate supervision. Pressure or mental fatigue, that happens a whole lot. Inadequate safety management systems, especially permit to work. I was a contractor early on in my career, and I was a guy picking up that permit to work. And I'll tell you, some of those were more thorough than others, that's for sure. Failure to learn lessons from previous incidents. What did I say about management and learning? I think learning is super important. Communication and reporting issues between shifts and personnel, inadequate reporting systems, complacency. Holy Toledo, that's a huge one for everyone, is complacency. Violations or non-compliant behavior, inadequate training, lack of competency. OSHA and the IEC 61511 standard doesn't say you have to be an expert in anything. It says you have to be competent in whatever area of work that you're assigned to do. Modification or updates to equipment, and inadequate, insufficient, or erroneous maintenance. Well, this Yokogawa RAP solution solves all of these problems right here. I think that's important to note. And on top of it, it can help address some of these as well, depending on what level you want to do implementation for it. So, this is an application that's been around for 25 years or so. We put it in many, many highly hazardous applications around the world, highly hazardous industries. And, it's very valuable in in reducing the cause of some of these accidents. And it really is a power to truly change safety culture, right? It's an intelligent alternative to just digitizing your paper-based control of work. So the first step everyone does in this whole digital transformation journey is always digitization. It's taking that paper and turning that paper into something electronic. And for the most part, it's there because it's easier to record keep an electronic piece of paper than it is a piece of paper, right? So, but this is a whole lot more than that. It's an intelligent version of that. And again, it comes from experience gained from millions of hours and high hazard risk assessment, isolations, and permitting work built in. And I think if you look at isolations and bypasses, I think it's important to know that getting a work permit is important, but doing the isolation and the risk assessment in real time to say, yes, now's the time you can go out and do it. You're safe to go out and do this work now because we've isolated and taken care of everything. This wrap solution puts simple, intuitive, auditable risk assessment at the forefront of digital work management. So again, the auditable risk assessment up front is the piece that I love so much as a safety guy. I don't like going into a customer's control room and them asking me to go out and do a site walk down if they can't prove to me what is and what is not in maintenance bypass. Right? I want to see that. I want to see what actually is in bypass before I go out. And if a customer can't tell me what's in bypass, and if he can tell me what's in bypass and not how long it's been there, I don't really feel comfortable going out there. This solution gives an auditable real-time risk assessment whenever you're doing digital work management, which is very, very valuable. And the wrap system looks a whole lot like earlier we talked about neural networks. It looks a whole lot like that, right? It's putting safety on the forefront of everyone's mind, not just on paperwork. So we're not just saying, here's our work permit. We're saying that, here's the cortex of the solution, and it has to do with all of these things, right? Permit to work, isolations, barrier management, interlocks and overrides, turnaround, mobile. You have a mobile application to do it, as well as handling your management of change, reporting, and your audit. And again, more importantly than anything else, is your risk assessment. And again, it uses very clear, intuitive modules with intelligence to assure complete work, control of work, audit, compliance, and it does drive continuous safety improvement. And the big overall benefits that you see from this wrap solution is efficient working. It does create better work practices, repeatable work practices, and improves your turnarounds, as well as integration of multiple systems. It does compliance as a routine. And again, compliance should just happen. You shouldn't have to think about compliance. It just should be inherent to your business. So compliance is a routine. It looks at covering all your risks, handles all your authorizations across the organization, tracks and record all the events, and it's trackable after the fact. And it focuses on the risk, and it helps to set standards across your organization. And learning. And again, I think learning is so important today, and it's about closing the loop, not just looking at one single island of risk, but all of it and closing the loop on it and making it stick. So once you capture that knowledge, use it going forward. And it does create an instant fix, and it supports multiple languages, which is great in 2023. And it does help change and improve the culture of safety within the organization. And a real quick discussion around or talk about improving safety culture. Doug Parker, in an interview in 2022, he's the Assistant Secretary of Labor. He says it's important that we respond to the needs of our workers. What we do as an organization is not just compliance. We're keeping families together. And I think that at the end of the day, if you can make safety personal, if you can make safety personal to everyone, then it's going to encourage more people just to do it by nature and not think about it because it's just something you do every day when you get up, right? Make safety personal. There are some challenges around safety. So most safety people don't have people reporting into them except for the safety people on their team. So at the end of the day, they can't tell people exactly what to do, right? What the policies they came up with had to be pushed down by senior management. So I think what's really important is the safety leadership has to cultivate and maintain good working relationships within an organization. So if you're wanting the people on the production line to do things a specific way, maybe instead of going out there and demanding it, go create some relationships and go foster some good personal relationships with these people to help them or to help you better spread your message to them. Continuous improvement or Kaizen in the Japanese, I'm a Japanese company and we talk about continuous improvement or Kaizen. I think continuous improvement it cultivates a spirit of a cooperation. So, asking people's input on how they can improve a process, I think that's really a great thing for sure. And if you could focus your management's attention on the fact that safety can, in fact, be a profit center rather than an expense with no payback, that's where the magic happens, right? We don't have the luxury in 2023 of installing a safety system or doing something from a safety perspective because, quote unquote, OSHA said so. We need to somehow show an ROI. And it's always been difficult to show ROI for safety. But I think that now with some of these digital tools and digital technologies, we can leverage some of those and actually improve our process performance to some degree where we can actually show some monetary value for some of the things that we're doing from a safety perspective. And as a safety person, again, as a leader, you're a partner or you an enforcer. Perception becomes fact. If they think about the safety person as an enforcer who's like looking over their shoulder, making sure they're doing the right things, then that doesn't foster cooperation. It really, really doesn't. So you need to be a partner with people. You don't need to be an enforcer. You need to be a partner and show them how everything they do from a safety perspective is an improvement on the process and an improvement on the company. And I always start with why. So instead of stepping in and saying, you have to do this safety training because I said so, you say, hey, industry says there's been this much of an increase in slip, trips, fall, this much of an increase in ladder safety incidents. So we're going to do this. Always start with why versus the how or the what. I think there's a lot of value in that, and people understand and they can kind of relate to why you want to do things versus jumping right into it and saying you have to do this because I said so. And my final thoughts here. I think that adopting digital technologies is like a large block of cheese, right? Take it one bite at a time. Don't feel like you have to do everything. I think if you look at cybersecurity or safety or anything else, don't get stuck in that paralysis by analysis. Just get started, right? Take one little bite at a time. Avoid that we've always done it that way mentality. I hear that all of the time, and I've said it myself. So try to avoid that mentality. And also look out for those I will never, because you'll find yourself nevering like you've never ever before. And foster open communication up the organization and down it. So, it's one thing to have organizational leadership talking about safety culture, pushing it down to the people in the field. It's even more important to encourage and foster that communication back up, because that's where the good ideas come from. And I'll say that use every day, every event, every incident, every experience as an opportunity to learn and improve your processes and strengthen your commitment to safety. So with that, I thank you very much for your attention. And I think we're going to open up the floor to questions.
Thank you, Jimmy, for your insight and your informative presentation. Yes, we're going to get to the Q&A session now. Remember to enter your questions in the Q&A tab on the webinar platform, where we'll try to get to as many as we can during the time remaining. Anything that we don't get to, we'll answer individually by email following the program. I'm going to start here. At the end, you mentioned something, and as you were going through, I kept thinking about this. A lot of times we see safety, as you mentioned, from the top down, where corporate says this is what you must do. These are the protocols that you must follow. But a lot of times those edicts are coming from the folks who actually are not in the field or on the production line, actually doing the work. And you talked about the importance of having it also come from the bottom up. Can you talk a little bit about how an organization might go about fostering that type of collaboration among both the executives and the workforce?
Yeah, thanks, Daryl. I appreciate that. I think that I'm very fortunate in this regard, because the way that Yokogawa is set up in particular, they really encourage communication up and down. So I think that, again, it has to start from the top. Hopefully senior management can empower those frontline business leaders, the directors and others in the organizations, to encourage them to go out and speak to their people and get the word, from the field on the street, to bring that back to the organization. So, having a suggestion box, I don't think that's necessarily the most productive thing in the world, to put your suggestions in a box and have someone go through them. But creating a culture, a company culture of midline managers who can grab that information and from the people in the field and bring it up to management. I think that's what you need. You really need that middleware, middle management that encourages that communication up and down.
So you might have
Unfortunately, you just can't turn a switch and make that happen. But that would be the optimum thing for sure.
exactly. So you might have an organization that says, uh, perhaps they give people a handbook when they start, and they say, this is what you need to know. And that kind of becomes the extent of it. It's like, well, we expected you to read the handbook. We expected you to know what was expected of you. Uh, what's a better way that an organization can go about this type of training? And should they really set time aside, either during an onboarding process or just maybe quarterly, once or twice a year, bring folks together to say this is how we need to be doing things? What in your experience, what's the best way that you've seen to do that?
Yeah, I think that organizational improvement as well as safety culture, it can't be a set it and forget it. It can't be like reading a business book and taking that business book and putting it on a shelf and never going back and referencing it later. We have a business book club that I started, and that's what I encourage people. Don't just read it and put it away. Read it and use those things. And I think that having having teams of people to go out and not necessarily again say you have to do this, but people walking the walk and talking the talk organizationally. People that are good cheerleaders, I think, are really important. I think that one thing to have from the top, pushing it down, but to have those people in the organization who are kind of cheerleaders who don't say you have to do this, but say this is really a great idea, and also creating quarterly competence and quarterly requirements or monthly requirements. All the safety standards, even these process safety management standards, says you have to be competent, you have to have training, and you have to go back and review that training from time to time. So I think that's what you really need. You need a champion or multiple champions in the organization, I think, which is the most valuable piece.
So we had a question come in, someone asking, in certain industries such as nuclear power facilities, one of the primary issues with digital technologies is vulnerability to cyber attacks, and then the cybersecurity requirements, which they mentioned could be burdensome, uh, create whole new sets of personnel not needed in the past. Can you identify for such hypersensitive industries why utilization of digital technologies and improvement over analog systems that were not vulnerable to cyber attacks?
Yeah, it's really, really difficult, especially for nuclear, right? I think that nuclear has always been such a closed industry. They don't want to share anything in or out of what they do. And I think that, even the chemical and process industry is the same way to some degree. IEC 62443, the International Cybersecurity Standard, gives a lot of guidelines on how to properly isolate your application so you can take advantage of some of these digital solutions without opening yourself to possible compromise attacks. Also, the ISA, who I mentioned earlier, used to be the Instrument Society of America. It's now the International Society for Automation. They have a working group, and they put together some really great cybersecurity best practices for industry. So not necessarily for nuclear, but just for the process industry in general. So I would encourage you to go look at the ISA working group for cybersecurity, because they give some really practical examples on how to best implement digital technologies and things. And really there's lots of working groups together, but I think the ISA does the best job of having real feet on the street people who are the industry leaders who are putting together best practices. So that's what I would suggest.
So someone asked about finding more detailed information about the RAP risk assessment system. And I know we mentioned the website at the beginning. The handouts have this presentation and an ebook. Is there more information available? Where would you suggest people can go to learn more?
I think that in the handout, that ebook we have there is a great start. It's only 5 pages, so it's really just 3 pages of content, and it's very concise on what the application is all about. There's contacts there depending on what part of the world this individual is from, that has contacts for the U.S. as well as abroad. So having a face-to-face discussion or a virtual discussion one-on-one would be the best way, in my opinion. So certainly feel free to reach out to me or anyone on our team, and we'd be more than happy to take you down the road and tell you a story.
Sounds good. You mentioned, and I know this is something that I hear a lot, the paper trail. And for years and years, documentation and people kind of got caught up in spending a lot of time writing papers or other information, detailed logs in and with digitization, obviously I think it's a more efficient and less time consuming practice. It does, though, open things up more to cybersecurity vulnerabilities. Is there a happy medium somewhere that can be reached? In your experience, what have you seen?
Well, that'd be great, wouldn't it? I don't really know the answer to the happy medium. I went to a symposium at Texas A&M University about 3 weeks ago. It's around process safety and instrumentation, and there were a couple of companies there in the chemical process industry who were very, very mature when it comes to digital transformation. I mean, one guy, he actually built a whole entire presentation using AI just to prove that he could do it, kind of thing. And they talked about their streamlined processes around how they actually have implemented digital transformation. I think the challenge for a lot of people, they get started with it and they realize they don't have the in-house expertise, and then it just kind of dies on the vine. Then they go back to what they were doing before. So I don't know about the happy medium, Daryl. I think that as time progresses and people get more data scientists and those types of people on staff who do this for a living, maybe it'll be more inherent to what we do versus this new thing. I mean, people have trouble actually having enough people on staff to do the normal day-to-day operations, and if you're asking them to digitally transform their business, that's a tall task. So I don't know the answer about a happy medium, but I think there are some great commercially off-the-shelf applications out there and solutions out there to help you get started and maybe build upon it.
You mentioned there are personnel issues, and I was going to bring that up with the need for more cybersecurity and more risk assessment. Does that create the need for people who are specifically trained in those areas? And companies should look at hiring those people. But again, a company may look at the bottom line and say, we just can't afford to do that. Can they afford not to do that?
I'll tell you one thing for sure. It's a difficult time to be on a witness stand and say we couldn't afford to do the right thing. That's a bad thing. There's some experts in my business who've been in the process industry for a long time, process safety in particular. They spend half their time now being expert witnesses when customers say, I couldn't afford to do the cybersecurity assessment I should have done. I couldn't afford to properly implement a safety instrument system or a risk assessment the way I should have. That doesn't fly. So these people have to go and either defend or deny or support what this customer is saying. But saying we didn't have the people, we didn't have the money. Well, at the end of the day, the government says you shouldn't be operating your facility then. So
exactly,
if you spend more money on landscaping than you do on cybersecurity risk, there's probably a problem.
Yeah,
with your priorities.
So we have some specific questions that came in here and ask, is AI and machine learning going to be integrated in the next version of ISA IEC 61511 and IEC 61508 standards, in your opinion?
I don't think that 61508 will address AI or machine learning for many years. Again, just in my personal opinion. IEC 61511, the process industry end user standard, I would say the answer to that probably is maybe. There is an ISA working group right now talking about how our process industry is going to handle artificial intelligence, machine learning, and even digital transformation is kind of all the same group. So again, I'd encourage you to go look at that working group, maybe even get involved in it, and how all these things really work. ISA working groups get together, form a best practice, and then over time that gets integrated into the 61511 standard. So yeah, I think that 61511 will have guidelines on how they're going to accept or approach or deflect those things going forward.
Yeah. Now here's a very specific question. I don't know if you can answer this, but perhaps you can direct this person to where they could find an answer. Please suggest how we can apply safe digital technology in the dosing or handling of hydrazine in a thermal power station.
Well, that's a real specific question right there. And unfortunately, I'm not the guy, but we have an army of chemical engineers who probably have thought about that or considered that. So I'd be more than happy to research that and run it by our process team and get back with you for sure.
So another question here: what makes the RAP system an essential add-on for a company versus a nice-to-have solution?
Well, it's permitting. Work permitting has been around since the beginning of time. If you can actually have work done in your facilities, you have to have a work permitting process. And I think that people look at RAP or other solutions like that, and they think of it as a replacement for the work permitting process, and that's true. But it just goes a lot deeper than that. So, I mean, you have to do isolation, you have to do risk assessment before you go out and do hot work permits or something else. Uh, so in my opinion, yeah, it is an essential thing because at the end of the day, you're controlling your risk, you're keeping the people out in the field safer, and at the end of the day, you're reducing your corporate risk. So when I was a contractor, I would go out in the field and I demanded, when I was an electrical contractor, I demanded to be able to pull the safety shower when I got out there to make sure that the water in the safety shower wasn't rusty, or the eye wash station. And then, digital technologies came out and they started putting sensors to know when the eye wash station came on so they could send someone out. Well, then they didn't want me to check it and test it. So I wasn't happy about that. I still wanted to be able to, look at there and make sure there's no rust in that thing before I start my work. So when I would get my work permit, I would say, I want this tested. And we go back and forth about it. But again, that's the risk for me that I wanted to reduce as an individual. And the plant would always enlighten me or allow me to do it, but they weren't very happy about it. But I think that at the end of the day, you want to make all your workers safe, and you want them to feel safe and feel heard. And a thing like, RAP allows that. And it just makes safety second nature when it comes to this types of things.
So we have a question here, and I think this perhaps speaks to the transition from analog systems that we had for years and years to digital systems. And they ask, regarding cybersecurity issues, most safety critical and safety related systems for Canadian nuclear power plants are not connected to a network, island systems. This is still true about modern nuclear power plant safety systems built over the past decade. And I realize not a lot, obviously, of new reactors have come online, but there have been a lot of upgrades to existing nuclear power plants. What can you say about how they have advanced their cybersecurity?
Well, I'm not a nuclear expert whatsoever, right? I mostly deal in the process industry, excluding nuclear. I kind of dabble in nuclear from time to time when I have to. The handful of customers I deal with, they still operate very, very isolated. But you remember who else operated very isolated, and that was the Iranian nuclear facility that was attacked by the Stuxnet virus. So it doesn't matter how much isolation you have, bad people can figure out bad things to do when they had the intent. So to answer your question, I don't really know the answer about isolation, but I can't imagine that most nuclear power plants would have much connectivity. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission in the U.S. Has kind of opened up some of their old requirements around certified products and things, but I don't think that any of the changes around isolation have changed over the years.
Yeah. So we have time for one more here, and this is one that I'm interested in as well. So earlier in your presentation, you mentioned how the safety teams skew conservative in regards to technology tools. The questioner says, when working with prospective clients, they found it challenging to get buying committees on board with purchasing tools unless some sort of safety related incident has already occurred. And I guess, they could look at that and say, this is what it cost our organization. What can you say about that? I think it also, again, speaks to, can they afford not to be proactive in something? And is there a greater risk simply saying, we're not going to do anything until something happens where we have to do something?
Yeah, I think that's the most difficult thing, right? Is trying to justify additional expenditure to do something different than what you're doing. Unless you can say that I had a compelling event. That's what our industry looks for a lot, is a compelling event that makes you do something different. One challenge that we've always had for safety is just that. What I've seen in the last 5 years, especially, is to come up with some type of value proposition, to create some type of value with an application that you're suggesting. Creating a return on investment statement for a safety application has been very, very difficult in the past. It's easy to say, well, if you have a safety incident, it's going to cost this much money. If you put the system in, you'll reduce that amount of risk. That sounds great, but it's kind of pie in the sky. But I think if you can look at the digital technology and actually save manpower and show how you can do that and create some actual monetary value and quantify it, that's how you get management's ears to poke up, and that's how you get them to listen and say, that makes sense to spend that money for safety because I'm going to get this other benefit that's separate from the safety piece.
Yeah, well, thanks very much for that. And we're approaching the end of the program. As mentioned, we'll address further questions individually via email. Thanks again to Jimmy Miller for his insight during today's event and to Yokogawa for underwriting today's program. A big thank you to all of you in the audience. We hope you'll benefit from today's presentation. Have a great day.
Thank you.